do your thing with some control, do your thing with some respect for each other. And that's probably not telling anybody here that, but we want to make sure we're modeling what we're talking about as we're all here to learn more about supporting young folks, supporting young minds, and it's specifically in this workshop, supporting healthy and healing communities. So I think that's really about it for me. I'm going to drop some links in the Whova app once I'm able to log into the chat. So if you're interested in getting a CEU for joining in today, you can definitely sign in for that. If you're just interested in signing in, letting us know you're here because we want to know that, please fill out a really quick survey. And then later on in the session today, I'm going to drop a link that's really just like a session feedback link. And if you can just take some time, because I know I often forget to do that, but if you can just take some time to fill out that survey, let us know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, what can be better next Young Minds Matter, that will be really appreciated. So number one, get in the chat, introduce yourself. What's your favorite ice cream? Where are you coming from? Number two, look out for those links. And number three, I'm going to pass it to my colleagues Xavier and Bana, and they're going to take it away. And you're going to enjoy what they have to say, ask lots of questions, and we're all going to be mad when we have to leave later on. So let me stop talking and pass the mic over.
Hey everybody, yes, my name is Xavier Lofton. I will not spend too much time on the intro. I'm here with my colleague Shabana Ali, and we actually do a bit of an intro in our recorded section. This is a bit of a hybrid of recording and live interactive session, but as Roosevelt said, I do want everybody to feel encouraged to use the chat. Since it is recorded, the first half of it, I will do my best to respond to the chat. And then if you have specific questions, Roosevelt will be able to ask us, or if you do feel comfortable later in the session, you will have the opportunity to use the raise hand feature, and then you will be unmuted to ask a question to one of us directly. So I think without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to our recorded part from this presentation. Over to you, Maddie. All right, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in. Thank you for joining this session, Rooted in Racial Justice, Growing Green Spaces for Healthy and Healing Communities. Before I get started, I just want to offer a slight disclaimer that some of the material covered may drum up some emotions and some reflections on personal experiences of folks on this call. We're all human, and I want everyone to be able to contribute in a way that is meaningful to them and is most beneficial. If you need to turn off your camera, step away from the screen, or whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, I encourage you to do that and do so whatever you need to do to feel centered in this time together. I also do encourage you to participate during the session through the Whova chat feature. Not sure if I said that right, but the Zoom chat will be disabled. Please do use the Whova feature. Today, I'll be co-presenting with my teammate, Shabana Ali. Before we get started, I'd like to take time for some brief introductions so you know a little bit more about us and why we're here today. I joined the Prevention Institute team back in January, and I'm still working remotely in my hometown of Philadelphia. Before joining the PI team, I worked for the Philly Health Department in the community-facing Division of Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention. Prior to that, I managed a community recreation center in the city's West Philadelphia neighborhood near where I grew up. And I've always felt this calming force whenever I'm in nature. And in past years, I've actually been able to research and record some of the tangible health benefits and put a name to some of those feelings that I couldn't quite explain before. Bringing my full self into this space, as a mixed race Black man, I've experienced firsthand the differences in opportunity for children to access that same calm feeling, purely based off of where they live. Shabana, why don't you go ahead and tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Shabana Ali. I'm the program assistant here at PI. Been at PI for about a year now. And my background is typically in community-based participatory research. I recently graduated about a year ago from Cal State East Bay. And I'm excited to be presenting here with Xavier.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then you'll.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Yeah, it looks like I muted myself there, but we're just going to keep pressing on. Thanks for sharing. And then if you also wanted to get in touch with us, our contact information is below. And then you will also get, along with the recording today, you will get these slides that you can access if you need. I got a little heavy on you guys pretty early, so I want to take time to give folks this opportunity to check in with themselves and notice how you're entering this virtual space with a temperature check. To help with that temperature check, I'd like to introduce the window of affect tolerance. Now, this is a tool I learned about in a health equity fellowship with the group Human Impact Partners, also Oakland-based, just like PI. This window is a physical depiction of your ability to regulate your feelings and to be fully present in any given moment. When you're within your window, you're feeling calm, you're able to take in stride whatever life throws your way. You're calm but not tired, you're alert but not anxious. As you move upward in your window into dysregulation, you might feel a little bit nervous or the anxiety creeping in a bit. You might be uncomfortable, but you're not out of control. And when you get sent completely high out of your window into hyperarousal, it could manifest in you blowing up on someone like the volcano you see in the diagram on the screen. As you move lower in your window towards that side of dysregulation, you may feel yourself starting to disconnect from reality a bit. You may not feel fully with it, but you're not out of control yet. When you get sent out of your window on the low end into hypoarousal, you feel completely checked out from reality, and at some points you might even feel like time has moved on without you. Now, there's three central questions you should be thinking to yourselves. Am I in the window? If I am in the window, or if I'm not in the window, am I high or low, but still able to be present in this conversation? And then also, the final question is you have to ask yourself, what can I do to regulate? What can I do to get myself back into this window? Now, the reason this matters is we have to recognize that we need to grow in better understanding of our own feelings before we can develop empathy for one another's life experiences that might be much different than our own. And in the pursuit of health equity and racial justice, we absolutely must operate from both a head and a heart space. Now, with that said, I do want you to keep that in mind as we go throughout the session and notice when you might spike high, low, or maybe you're one of those people that just takes everything in stride and can stay consistent throughout this presentation. And now I'll pass it back to Ivana for a preview of today's content.
So I want to take the time to encourage everyone to feel free to use the chat to ask any questions or to share any of your thoughts and feelings as we go on throughout today's presentation. And today's session will take a look at reoccurring themes, what research is saying, what is happening around the country, and afterwards, we will get a chance to explore opportunities and ideas in your own communities. Thanks. Awesome. So we're going to be taking a look at a few themes that we're going to be discussing today. As you can see, history of inequity is large in this picture because of the fact that inequity has shaped the social and physical landscape. And by doing so, it significantly affects the health of communities of color. It's important to be explicit about these racial injustices that have been imposed on these communities, done either intentionally or carelessly. Without that as a first step, we can get caught in a cycle of perpetuating and growing these inequities. And surrounding inequity in this picture are major positive themes that come out of green space, such as physical and mental health benefits, social connectivity, community building. Green space would be a resource that is owned and led by the communities, and it would increase multi-sector partnership and infrastructure development. And so I'm going to pass it back to Xavier to enlighten us about what the research says.
So It is much harder for folks to feel healthy if they feel unsafe. We all know that some neighborhoods are statistically safer when you look at the numbers. However, there's also a strong connection between human perception of safety and the time that we actually physically spend outside of our homes. On the other side of that same token, when we perceive our neighborhoods to be safe, we're more likely to engage in activities like visiting our local parks and green spaces. Vacant lots often operate as sites for folks to engage in what I'll call unhealthy activities. These spaces can create the perfect hiding spot for narcotics or weapons, specifically firearms. They also have a negative impact on those safety perceptions that I just spoke about and act as an accurate predictor of violent crime. African Americans, men, and older folks are statistically less likely to perceive their parks and local green spaces as safe. One of the reasons for this is that not all parks are created equal. In Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, parks are often ill-maintained, poorly designed, and underfunded. Now, what you're seeing here is a heat map of the city of Philadelphia. I'm sure most of us can guess, purely based off of this map, where all of these communities of color are located within my city. A large proportion of the vacant lots are often located in lower income and communities of color, causing these neighborhoods to be upwards of 10 to 15 degrees hotter. This, however, does present the opportunity for local government officials to actively and intentionally engage these communities to turn these lots into green spaces for the betterment of the social structure as well as the physical health landscape. Through a cross-sector collaborative in Los Angeles, there is currently an ongoing pilot program that enables community groups in poor park neighborhoods to adopt these city-owned vacant lots for the purpose of transforming them into community-serving public spaces. One of these groups in the collaborative, which I'll talk a little bit about later, is currently working to turn this pilot program into a permanent policy, which would include sustained funding for these projects. The greening of these communities would drastically reduce the surface temperatures of what is called heat islands, urban heat islands. Now, when I use the word greening, typically I'm talking about placement or care for plants in and or around buildings and public spaces. But I will also speak a little bit about site beautification through public art also having a similar benefit. Greening in vacant lots is associated with reduction in violent crime, as well as the the perception of potential crimes. It reduces what has been cited as stress and mental fatigue associated with urban life. And I pulled that out as a direct quote because I think it's something we kind of tend to overlook. Cities and living in cities is inherently stressful, which further drives home the point that we need in our cities and in our dense urban populations, we need places for folks to feel calm, to feel healthy, and to feel healed. And then as I previously noted, these stressors are further amplified within communities of color. Greening communities makes it also more difficult to engage in those unhealthy activities I mentioned, like firearms and narcotics use and trafficking. Greening also presents the opportunity to foster a sense of community ownership, social cohesion across generations and across ethnic backgrounds, as you can see here in this photo. The process to increase these social positive interactions between neighbors can also offer these spaces as sites for community healing, particularly in places where folks have been historically left out of decision-making. Now, I'm going to take this chance to pause, take a drink, and also I want to remind folks, please, as we go through this, leave your comments, thoughts, feelings, questions, whatever is coming up for you in the Whova chat. So, one of the places that I mentioned where this greening and this social movement is taking place is within the city of Los Angeles. The Adopt a Lot program is a partnership between the city of LA, I'm going to really butcher this name, so apologies in advance. Konkue Design Initiative and the Inclusive Action for the City. So out of the 2,000 city-owned vacant lots that are just idly sitting across the city, community groups are given the opportunity, community groups specifically in these park-poor neighborhoods are allowed to adopt these city-owned vacant lots and transform them into spaces that actually serve their population, their community. So if you can actually see at the bottom, there's kind of the outline for the process where the person or the group who adopts this field, this park, this vacant space is given, is given the okay, you've been selected. They collect ideas from the community, which has to go through a vote for that and from that specific community. Once the community has decided that, yes, this is what we want to move forward with, this is how we want to use this park space, this is how we see our community best being served, then all of the planning, design, and building happens before you celebrate, because this is a big undertaking. And I did mention that the Inclusive Action for the City is actually the group that is currently working to make this a standard policy, to have this be more than just a one-off program that can be cut from funding at any time. Moving on to my side of the country, in New York City, the Sustainable South Bronx program is, Sustainable South Bronx is a housing and urban development sponsored program for economic development and green roofing and park stewardship. I mentioned the heat islands. Green roofing is one of the ways that you can start to reverse some of those effects in largely populated cities like New York. So they create bicycle and pedestrian friendly infrastructure in addition to the green roofing. And as part of a sustainability to this program, the Bronx Environmental Stewardship Academy is providing training for residents, specifically in South Bronx, to have these green job skills that are really promoting a workforce that will then work for 22nd century jobs. We're not teaching people in this program about jobs of the past. We're trying to create jobs and funding revenue or funding streams for folks to be employed, gainfully employed in the future. So Intervine is another example. I just described a little bit about the NYC Cool Roofs program, but Intervine also does do trash cleanup. It provides training for the irrigation and environmental upkeep of these places, these parks that are being built in the Bronx. Similarly, down in Atlanta, the Proctor Street watershed is qualified as, or was qualified as, an environmentally degraded urban watershed. That does not sound great, but with that designation, they did receive some funding along with advocacy from the community to sponsor a similar program that provided training specifically for young folks, that is, people under the age of 24, for those same skills in construction, gardening, landscaping, and then other green infrastructure skills. Moving on to Denver, the Platt Open Farm open space in the city of Denver, but in the neighborhood of Globeville, was another cross-sector partnership, and it was a revitalization process for what was formerly qualified as a brownfield site. You can assume what that means. There was not a lot of greenery, vegetation, or anything actually growing, and many folks actually used it for a dumping site just due to the way that it looked. But now, 5.5 acres of green space, parks, walking trails, wildflowers, and gardens, this place is now seen as a pillar of the community, much less a dumping ground, like so many other places and communities that you're familiar with. Now, talking about funding, Measure 2A provided a 0.25% tax increase for all sales in Denver City of Denver, and that is for the express purpose of expanding and maintaining the city's park system. And the key thing that I really want to stress, and you'll see kind of recurring throughout this, is that community members are intentionally included at each step of these processes. Now, I'm a Philly boy, so I have to tell you what's going on in my city of Philadelphia. Other than another attempt this year to try and take home the NBA title, there's a lot going on in the world of green space and infrastructure development that really works to reduce some of those urban heat areas. I'll talk to you a little bit specifically about Nature PHL and the Mural Arts program, but there is another program I like to really briefly touch on, which is We Walk PHL, which accesses the parks that are already existing in neighborhoods and just has more of a social cohesion to establishing walking groups, having walk leaders that are paid for their time by the city, fully funded by city resources, and they are the ones who activate their community, do the promotion, clean up, and just rally around their fellow community members to make sure that these parks that do exist are being utilized. Talking a little bit about Nature PHL, the map you see on the left is the largest portion of the Fairmount Park system, which represents about, 9,000, I always forget the exact number, but about 9,000 acres of park space across 63 separate parks in the entire system. Nature PHL was, again, multi-sector collaborative between Philly Parks and Rec, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education, and the U.S. Forest Service to really just show and help young folks get to an outside park space that we know has this healing quality. And these are doctors that are physically prescribing that students and children, which happens to then get their family, to engage in activities in parks, in green spaces, and get out of the city, get out of the smog, or at least in the densely populated areas where there are still some industrial holdovers from the 1900s. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the Mural Arts program, and specifically one aspect called Playgrounds for Useful Knowledge. And it's similar to the LA process, in which a plot of land, which formerly was a vacant lot, has been kind of granted to this process from the city that will then have an information session, invite folks from the community to come out, have them exchange stories, have them build bonds that weren't previously there using the green space, or it's not the green space yet, using the vacant lot as a primer for that social cohesion. And instead of me talking more about it, I'm just gonna go ahead and play this video. It's a quick 5-minute video that I'd like you all to kind of just listen to what's happening in the city of Philadelphia.
The main purpose of the project is like really to allow mural arts to deal with public art in a different way and to engage in a neighborhood in a long term.
The idea is to create a project that comes from up inside, from the neighbors, from the individuals in the neighborhood who get activated, and to work together to develop a project.
Is a departure for us because it's really, in a way, conceptual at this phase. Community organizers, academics, activists, artists, planners who have come together to work with us on challenging, lifting up, shining a light on, educating us about our community organizing process in order that we do our work better.
We started with a process made of 3 actions in which we question about the issues in the neighborhood, the useful knowledge that is in the neighborhood, how to share knowledge, how to use this knowledge to change things and issues that are really facing, the people are facing every day. and how actually to go through a collective process, because I think only when you are like a group you can think about, or a common, and you have a common vision, you can go beyond your personal interest, and you can just like really build up something for the community.
So for us today it's a quite special moment. It's a moment in which we are giving back to the neighborhood this manual, this toolkit. We understood and we interviewed a lot of people from the neighborhood, and we understood their fears and their expectations, their hopes of the neighborhood. But also we interviewed a lot of people that were that had a technical understanding, so urban planners, anthropologists, sociologists, and we compiled all this together in a manual that gives community members all the kind of the stats, but also the cliches on the neighborhood. It's a moment in which all the people that initially saw us as with a certain sometimes even fear or misunderstanding, and that progressively became friends and became partners in doing something together.
So it's about taking Restored Spaces to another level, and mural arts, because we're an older organization now with many more resources, and how we can do that to leverage something that's really significant with community members.
I saw the immigrant community in general growing in the area, but we don't feel connected. So in this project, I think was the opportunity to talk together, to be part of something together.
When your street is full of trash and broken glass, because it's identified that you have a broken home. But actually 7th Street of South Philadelphia is not a broken place. We have hope. Hope is come like one individual. And see, after all this meeting, after with all this joining the meeting after meeting, I learned that I'm not alone. Everybody care.
The initiative taken by this project, bringing in different communities, bringing in community leaders for conversation, the community as a whole to know each other's problem, and the collective problem of the whole society who are living here. It was really wonderful, and moving forward I see a great opportunities moving our way in making it a harmonious place to live in.
And I am hoping that after a year working in these communities through the work of cohabitation strategy, which has been interested and varied and has shown us many of the dynamics, the urban dynamics, the social dynamics, the economic dynamics, but has also built a community in the sense of being a glue between disparate ethnic groups that occupy South Philadelphia.
They really got us thinking in a more visionary way, because a lot of times always what's our next event, how do we do our next grant, and this was an opportunity to kind of sit and talk together about what's a bigger vision and how could we get to a bigger vision.
But for me the key thing here is that whatever decision is made with absolute certainty that this is what the people that are representing the community here in this project, that are embedded in it, wanted.
What is the end game? The end game is that we do our work with the utmost integrity and dedication, and we want to get it right, and we want to create change in the city through art, and that is not easy. It's extremely complicated, and in order to do it well, one has to surround themselves with people whose practice is very different than their own.
All right, so as we transition to the live portion of this session, I would invite you again to please chat anything that's coming up for you at this moment. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, I do understand that programs are great. It's really good to see these things going off. However, we do need fully funded, sustainable solutions to operationalize growing green spaces, particularly in communities of color, because of what we know, the fact that racist policies and practices are the reason that these green spaces are less vibrant than in the counterparts in white communities. So with that being said, I'm just going to say, I'll see you in real time. I had myself double muted, but yes, folks, so we are live again. Thank you for listening to our recorded part of this presentation. And as I said in the recording 5 days ago when I took it, please do comment thoughts, feelings, comments into the chat as we work to get the live version of the rest of this presentation up and running. You might be double muted, Roosevelt.
Not yet. I haven't done the double mute yet. It'll probably come later though. But I did want to remind everybody, in case questions don't come up right now, in case comments don't come up right now, I definitely want to remind you or let you know that Xavier and Bonna will be available even after this session, even after this portion that they're going to walk us through. They will definitely be available, and you can contact them through the Hoover app. So just a heads up in case questions aren't coming up immediately.
I do see we have one here in the chat. Where does one start? That's a good question. I think it really is based in wherever your community is. Prevention Institute actually does have an LA-based office that does do a lot of work in the parks, green space, and safety work. So I could definitely get back with you and then try and forward over some information that we have and get you in contact with some of our LA crew who might be better connected in your area of LA.
Awesome. So as Xavier mentioned, please use the chat, drop your questions in the Q&A, and we will try to answer them. Next slide, please, Maddie. Awesome. So we're not doing breakout groups, but there is a question that we want to ask everyone. And like I mentioned, you can answer in the chat, or you can also use the raise the hand feature, and we will invite you to unmute. But something that we wanted to ask everyone is, how can young people be encouraged as advocates and stewards of green spaces in your community? So we definitely want everyone to think a little bit more about, their own community and the places that they live.
So I do see one question we have in the Q&A. I actually see two, but the first one we're going to point to is from Janice in Colorado, who, she's describing a global warming reality that a lot of us are living in, where days can be 60 degrees in one day and 30 the next. I'm sure some of the folks on this call who work for PI and had meetings with me yesterday noted that I was wearing a tank top yesterday. It was like 80 degrees, and now it is back to the high 50s where I'm in a sweater. But related to, I actually haven't heard of Ron Finley's guerrilla gardening, but I would encourage you to look in, the slides are available on the Hoover app. I will encourage you to look into that platform Open Space in Denver. And then I don't know exactly what the tax law is in the city of Denver, but there is the opportunity that has been created by this 0.25% increase. And there's probably a way where you can get to your either city councilman or whatever the official is in your district, in your area, to promote and get a coalition of folks who are like-minded like you to advocate for the development of some more some more green space that has the ability to curb and adapt to the changing climate that we are currently dealing with. I hope that answered your question, but I will make sure that I follow up and get you some of that information on Platform Open Space. And another question, which I have a very similar answer, Heather asked, where can we find models that we provided? I will share the slides already shared in the Whova app, and I will do my best to connect with you, Heather, offline, so I can, find out exactly where you are and more of like a detail for what you're looking for. But I definitely would love to have that type of conversation with you. Okay, the chat's starting to get a little lively now. Got Urban Roots in Austin, Texas. Mural arts definitely is a way to engage youth and young adults. I think when you try to encourage young folks to be creative, I think that is another way to really get them to feel empowered that they do have a voice in their community and they can change. So they're more likely to engage in those positive social interactions that I spoke about. And it really gives them the sense of agency that, again, they are the ones who are, we say kids of the future all the time, but as adults, we don't really show it, if I'm being honest. So this is an opportunity to put our money where our mouths are. Yes, lots of people are excited. I love it. Youth events, yes, youth events definitely are a way to, if nothing else, find folks, young folks out there who are interested in improving their environments, improving their community. And again, just lets them kind of celebrate who they are for their creativity and their individuality. And then when I was working in a recreation center in West Philly, if you tell children that, or young folks, that they have to do something, chances are they're probably not going to do it or do it grudgingly with an attitude. But if you kind of challenge young folks to do something that adults might not have thought of, challenge them to think outside the box, that's where they really actually start to care. Because I'm sure we know a lot of young folks that have that, I don't care mentality, we'll say. Now we've got some connections happening. We've got Jennifer who's talking about their program or their group, Nature and Eclectic Outdoors and Healthy Outdoor Communities. That sounds great. So that is a collaborative that the folks in Houston might be able to reach out to Jennifer to try and get them, to try and drum up some more support, try and get some more young folks, since it does seem that there is a commissioner and a councilwoman that do listen to them. I think this is a good time that, oh, there we go. She dropped the link right in that chat. I love it. This is what the connections are all about. So I think at this point is a good time to continue on the live. And Sheila posted some of that park equity stuff that I was talking about that PI is engaged in. Thank you, Sheila. That's beautiful. So I think now we can go ahead and get into more of the live presentation portion, but keep the chat flowing. Keep the comments going. And then we will be able to make some connections. Thank you again, Jennifer, for volunteering your group and your space. So this is about young minds. We do believe that young minds matter because we have common sense about us, and of course they do. So when we talk about green schoolyards, I'm going to talk about this this graphic that comes to us from a partnership between the National League of Cities and the Children in Nature Network in the program Connecting Children to Nature. So you've heard me detail a little bit in the recording that there are statistical health benefits when people are closer to nature and green spaces. And with and increased diagnosis of mental health disorders among children, green schoolyards can operate as a tremendous mitigating factor for an entire community, not just the young folks that even go to that school to start. And then you could see in the graphic, or you might not exactly be able to see because the type is a little small, but I'll tell you that green schoolyards can provide the sense of calm that I noted a couple times earlier. And then having green spaces located on school property also fosters that positive feeling of a school, which not all children have as they get a little older. They don't have the best relationship with schools all the time. And then in general, it aids children in being able to bounce back from negative emotions, which children have a lot of emotions as they're growing up. It's all a part of growing up. And then just like a forest full of trees, students do feel more supported within their social networks, and that helps them build their individual resilience just by having that green space access in a place where they spend not 40 hours, but let's say, 35, 30 hours a week. Public schools do often occupy large plots of land. And this is, I'll pose it as an opportunity to take this traditionally underutilized space and transform it into a healing space that supports the entire community. Again, not just the children that attend those schools specifically. Through changing the physical landscape, we can also transform the social climate and foster more of those positive social interactions within communities. And that would lead to those better perceptions of safety, which creates that cycle of better perceptions, more park usage, and then fueling the better social connectivity, which would kind of mitigate some of those negative behaviors that happen in a lot of communities that you probably work with. And then finally, to speak to the title of this presentation, we must lead these school greening efforts with a lens of racial justice in order to create more equitable opportunities for these communities that we know have been traditionally left out of the conversation and underserved intentionally. A lot of this stuff is intentional throughout history, and we can't build on broken systems. Rather, the systems are not broken. They were created for a reason, and we have to change them. And as we move on to the next slides, I'm just going to show a couple of schools that the Mural Arts Program at Philly has worked with. We have the Southwark School, which is located in South Philadelphia, near the 7th Street project that the video explained. And this is, may seem small, but I'm not too far away from this part of South Philly, and there are not a lot of green spaces. There's a lot of just concrete city blocks and crumbling infrastructure, making it the perfect place for more types of green infrastructure like this. In the next slide, you'll see a high school that has, again, both those features of mural beautification and green spaces. So those trees are pretty young, but these trees are put there for the purpose of being pillars within their school, and the schools are supposed to act then as pillars of the community. So as these trees grow big and strong, we are using these schools to strengthen the communities. And then the last one I do want to show is my personal favorite, Cramp Elementary, because I love how this design of the murals on these schools, it actually is kind of providing examples of some of the foods and fruits and vegetables that they are growing in those raised plant beds. Fun fact about Philadelphia, I noted the industrial past, and it is actually encouraged to have raised plant beds because we have to, in this city, be mindful of our history that, as you can imagine, a lot of these industrial places are where communities of color now live. And then one thing I do want to mention about green schoolyards, if you see, there was a couple presentations that were linked to this one, and one of them comes from a friend of PI, Jaime Gonzalez, who works for the Nature Conservancy, and he is based in Houston. He can dive a whole lot deeper into these green schoolyards. So please do check that out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about some of the things that I briefly covered. Shabana, I'm going to pass it back to you for the next one.
All right, so in our earlier presentation, you saw that history of inequity was kind of bigger than all the other themes that were happening, all the other positive themes. And now you see that with the safety of green space, history of inequity is smaller, and all the other positive themes are bigger. And this is essentially healing, right? So next slide, please.
And because I would like to promote a little bit internally, or rather a little bit about what's happening internally, and provide this opportunity and broadcast this opportunity to engage in some of the work that we've talked about today. The Prevention Institute has been given the opportunity to manage a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded opportunity for parks and green space development. Particularly, we're thinking about and wanting to engage communities of color and folks that have been marginalized due to systemic racism. And honestly, if I can just tell you, systemic racism is not good for white folks either. And I think that's something that we really need to be mindful of. And you can see here, there's $7 million up for grabs across 14 people or folks who are going to be selected. So if we do the math, that's $500,000 each. And I would love to have $500,000 to design some green spaces near me, because in my part of South Philly, we have a couple different parks, but yeah, they're not, all parks are not created equal, as I said earlier in the presentation. So if you're really interested in this, I hope a lot of you are. We are going to begin, or excuse me, the project is going to launch on May 15th. But if you want to get in, really try and get your letters of intent, which is only about 3 pages. Try and get those submitted. I will share all of that information as well by November 4th. And then if you think you're wanting to do this, but might need a little help, we will be able, at PI, we'll be able to provide some technical assistance and help you get that grant launched. But please, you've got about, 2 weeks. So November 1st would be the last opportunity that we would be able to provide that technical assistance, because we do want you to submit those letters by November 4th. Again, I talked about the focus being policy and systems change. Programs are great, but we need sustainability, and that happens by putting the pen to paper in these government offices that we need to control from our communities that we are coming from. We want to build power in these areas, exactly like what happened in the examples that I provided, and we really want this to be driven by communities that we serve, because if we're here for work and you're joining this conversation because you want to help out, we do serve these communities, and we want to be able to give them everything that we are able to. Another thing before we head on to the discussion is I want to note that the other presentation that is linked to this is exactly about this People, Parks, and Power funding opportunity. So if you're interested, that recording will be linked. And if you still need a little bit of encouragement, you can email me directly. My contact information is on Whova, and you can also reach out directly to me because I have my contact info up. All right, y'all, let's talk.
And I just put a comment back. I saw a Q&A come in, I believe, Josue. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask that question, just let us know. But if not, I'm definitely down to read that aloud for our presenters.
Oh, there we go. Hi, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. My question, now I'm looking for it here. What kind of funding is needed to sustain staffing and consistent programming for something like this? When I think about the mural project, when I think about the different examples of, you know, how money like this could really help, what are the basic budget items from experience that you can share with somebody that might not have a good look at, well, we're gonna need like 4 or 5 people part-time, or like, what does that kind of look like? Thank you.
Ooh, coming out early with a tough one. So I personally have not engaged in something like a mural arts project or any of the other examples that I gave. But one thing that I do know is there are places in the areas where you all are working and living that there is this push for green infrastructure. There is a lot more people that are believing that climate change is real. There's a lot of folks that still doubt, but there is a coalition and a community in the neighborhood where you live. But I would say in order to actually change the system, not the system, but the system, we have to put pen to paper, we have to get in the ears of our council members, and we have to bring along young folks in those discussions. And I'm sure between the different youth serving organizations that you work with, as well as I would even put out the Nature Conservancy, that would probably be my two places to start who might have a way better answer than me.
Thank you for that, the Nature Conservancy.
And thanks for the question, Jose. Or excuse me, Josue. Anybody else have a question that they want to lift up? We want to make sure before this session ends, we get a chance to engage, interact with Bana and Xavier. I know they were able to share a lot, kind of take us across the country, but anybody else, if you have anything specific for where you are or just something you're curious about or something we can tee up for them to maybe follow up with you about later, they're definitely open to it. Double checking to see I'm not double muted. I'm good. Seeing no questions, hearing no questions, y'all. I'll give it like 30 seconds as I give my last spiel. We will wrap up pretty soon. I'm gonna just quickly paste in the chat a link where you can fill out just a review, just to give us a little bit of feedback. We love doing Young Minds Matter. We love having this conference. We love having speakers like Bana and Xavier and all the other ones who you've heard so far. Or maybe this is your first session of the day and you're about to jump into another session. We definitely want to hear back from you so we know how to make this better and better and better each year. If you're going to another session, please do give some, there goes little man, please do give some feedback. And we'd love to hear from you. And again, if anybody was looking for that link to CEUs, it was shared a little bit earlier in the conversation. So just definitely scroll up in the chat. Well, with that, I will definitely pass it over to Xavier and Bana to see if you all have any closing words you'd like to share.
I just want to thank everyone for showing up, for being present and interacting and, you know, typing away in the chat. And yeah, back to you, Xavier.
Yeah, echoing those thoughts. Love that we have the chat really popping off. It really helps the presentations that I like to lead. I definitely do not like to just speak to folks and then hear echoes of silence. I really do love how folks are really engaged, and I think this community in this space is its own community. And I really think that you have helped make my presentation even better.
Thank you all. You can probably hear him. Ransom is saying thank you. Bana, Xavier, thank you. And to the audience, thank y'all for joining. Enjoy the rest of the Young Minds Matter 2021 conference. Take care, y'all.